See, I liked it. I think it does two things. On the one hand, it's a kind of old-fashioned rollicking spy drama about cracking, wartime codes and all those adventures going on in Hut 8. On the other hand, it's also a film which has this kind of astringent streak, which is about what happened to Turing. And, as Gordon Brown himself put it, he deserved so much better. So the film has this melancholic underpinning and this sense of anger that he's talking about. But actually, it's not a tragedy. The film is very much a celebration. The film is very much something that says, look, this guy did this thing and it's really amazing and it's really astonishing. And it does, I think, makes a very good fist of putting him as a kind of anti-hero. If you're flying the flag from, you come out of it thinking, what a fascinating guy, what a fascinating story. The fact that it's directed by Morten Tilden, who of course before made Headhunters, which is tonally very divergent, and he's a Norwegian director, and it reminded me to some extent of what's happening with Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, that if you get a director who actually isn't ensconced in the milieu, isn't necessarily a British director, they bring to it an outsider's eye, which I think is fascinating and works really well. The reason that the film is able to get, in terms of its history, it takes a number of liberties that basically range from exactly what you'd expect to sometimes being a little bit too clumsy for its own good. There's one moment in which they crack a particular code and then they throw the brother of one of the code breakers onto a boat, which you don't need. It's like the cracking of the code was enough and the moral dilemma was enough. So there are overstatements. There were also some controversies at the beginning that the biographer upon whose book the script was based said that they had overplayed the relationship with Joan. And there was a sense that was being done sort of to kind of, in favour, to somehow be coy about his actual sexual relations. I don't think the film is at all. I think the film is very, very clear. What it does is it portrays him, as he describes himself, as an odd duck, somebody who actually, his most romantic engagements, other than this early infatuation with Christopher when he's at school, and incidentally, Alex Other is absolutely brilliant. The guy who plays that kid we are going to be having on the show in 8 years' time as he's off to win BAFTAs. He is absolutely brilliant.
It is a fantastic performance.
But what the film does is, for a start, if you look at Hugh Whitemore's play, which has got a bifurcated time structure, it has three distinct time structures. It has the school days, it has the stuff in Hut 8 during Bletchley Park, and it has the stuff in 1952, the sort of tragedy of the aftermath of the break-in. And it juggles those time structures very well. And the film runs on very clear lines, and most of the performances are delivered as pretty straightforward vignettes. So we have Charles Dance being, witheringly supercilious. We have Mark Strong doing that thing about, on the one hand, he's magnanimous, on the other hand, he's menacing. We have Keira Knightley playing a role which actually is written, I have to say, very much like a kind of posh girl caricature. She does say, ew, but she does manage to inject real warmth into it. And I think she's really good. I don't think her role is written brilliantly, but I think she does really well with it. But the reason all those things have to be clear and straightforward and, narratively simplified and with a certain degree of historical license is because at the centre of it is Benedict Cumberbatch's Alan Turing, who is, of course, as the film plays this idea, he is the central enigma. He is the person who remains actually unreadable. And his primary relationship is kind of falling in love with the artificial intelligence which he gets to build. And again, I'm sorry that everything seems to lead me back to Blade Runner at the moment, but I did end up thinking about that, the Imitation Game actually being something that Turing developed, a game about if you can't see a man or a woman, do you know which is which? Well, if you replace one with a computer, do you know if it's a man or a computer? Well, that's kind of like Blade Runner's Voight-Kampff test, and there is something of Deckard in him, of sort of falling in love with an android, even though it's an android. It's a portrait of somebody whose primary emotions are cerebral. It's got very good, clearly drawn contexts in which you can see a character who is so completely mercurial and so completely unreadable that at one point you actually start to wonder whether he genuinely is a Soviet spy. I think it's a solid film, raised to another level by a really, really intelligent performance by Benedict Cumberbatch. And I think the film itself rattles along like a train going over points in the track and manages to get all those changes clear.